We're learning the Rambam yesterday as part of the tikkun of the Chet HaMeraglim. Shivas of the Tammuz culminates in Tisha B'Av. We should see the Gula Shlema before Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av will be a Yontif. Tisha B'Av, the two of the five things for which we fast on Tisha B'Av are the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash by the Babylonians, the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash by the Romans. Tisha B'Av was designated as a day of crying because the Jews committed the Chet HaMeraglim on Tisha B'Av. The Meraglim came back and reported, and the night of Tisha B'Av, the Jews said, we're not going to Eretz Yisrael, we're not interested, don't take us there. And they're crying and screaming and shouting. And the Rebbeinu Shalom said, the Gemara tells us in Tainus and Daf Chav Tes, the Rebbeinu Shalom said, you're crying for no reason. I want to give you a beautiful gift. Go to Eretz Yisrael. I'm giving you a beautiful gift. You're crying over a beautiful gift. I'm going to give you a good reasons to cry on Tisha B'Av. So if Rav Kook points out, the Chet of Tisha B'Av, the crying of Tisha B'Av, the Churban of Tisha B'Av begins with the Meraglim. And so during the 3 weeks, as we come now to Rosh Chodesh Av, during the 9 days, we need to work on being Masakin, repairing the Chet HaMeraglim. If the Chet HaMeraglim was the Lashon Hara in Eretz Yisrael, the Tikkun Chet HaMeraglim is talking wonderful, beautiful praises about Eretz Yisrael and learning the halachas of Eretz Yisrael. We're taking a look in the Rambam in the Hilchos Malachim, Perek Hey. We read numerous halachas of the Rambam. We said we would come back to why the Rambam does not count living in Eretz Yisrael as one of the 613 mitzvahs, although others do. For example, Nachmanides comments on the Rambam and says, oops, Rambam, I believe you forgot the mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael. We talked about the concrete number of 613, how you deal with that. The Ramban Nachmanides comments and says, last week's parasha, Matis Masay, and Masay, there's a pasuk that says, "Varashtem es ha'aretz v'shachtem bo," you shall conquer the land and live there. Mitzvah d'oraisa, every generation must do it to the extent that they can. It has nothing to do with the Beis Hamikdash. It's a mitzvah every generation. Notwithstanding the fact that the Rambam did not count this as one of the 613 mitzvahs, he yet incorporates in the Halacha Sefer, the Yad HaZakah, in the list of the 14 books, Sefer Shoftim, subject Hilchos Malachim Perek Hey, he incorporates all the halachas. So, for example, we read yesterday Perek Hey Malachim Halacha Tes, also Motzeis ve'Eretz Yisrael l'chutz la'aretz l'olam. It is forever osur, forever prohibited for a Jew to leave Eretz Yisrael and go to chutz la'aretz, except for the reasons he gave yesterday, temporarily to leave, for example, Parnasa, but then you must come back. And he gave as an example, if a person has to actually leave Eretz Yisrael to live in Chutz La'aretz, then it's because there's a famine, inflation going on in Eretz Yisrael. The Rambam told us from the Gemara in Baba Basra what that level of inflation has to be before you're allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. And even if it reaches that level of inflation, it's still not clear that everyone can leave Eretz Yisrael. The Rambam, quoting the Gemara in Baba Basra, said that Machlon and Chilyon, Naomi's two sons, were Gedolei Hador. They were great men in their generation, great men, great Talmidei Chachamim, and they died because, so we always talk about they married Rus and Orpah, they were Jewish, they were not Jewish. That's a whole sugya about Rus and Orpah. But the Gemara in Baba Basra says they died because they left Eretz Yisrael. Even though the famine inflation had reached the halachic level where you were permitted to leave Eretz Yisrael, the Gemara in Baba Basra, Daf Tzadik Aleph says, Machlon and Chilyon were great men of their generations, and they should have set an example for others. Even though it was halachically permissible to leave Eretz Yisrael because of the famine inflation, they should have not left. And because they left, they ended up dying a heavenly death for leaving Eretz Yisrael. That's what we were up to yesterday. We're going to look at the next Rambam. Okay, there's a question that was raised yesterday and a question that was raised again today. I don't particularly, people should ask their local rabbis. The shaila always comes up, is a person permitted to leave Eretz Yisrael to visit his elderly parents? Ask your local rabbi. I will only tell you this, that we read the Rambam yesterday. And the Rambam says the reasons you can leave Eretz Yisrael on a temporary basis is to study Torah, to find a woman to marry, to save property from a goy, or for business, and then you have to come right back to Eretz Yisrael. There is a question in Talmud Yerushalmi. There's a question at the end of Masechta Shavios in the Yerushalmi. Is a person permitted to leave Eretz Yisrael for kibbut av v'em? It is a question raised there. And that's all I can say right now. I don't paskin these kind of shilas. People get very, very emotional about these shilas. I myself had to deal with these shilas when my parents got old and were not well. These are very difficult shilas. The important thing to remember is, as I mentioned last week, to always remember in your mind that these are shilas. In other words, you can't do what you want, when you want, how you want. We don't eat matzah when we want, how we want. You can eat matzah when you want, how you want, but in terms of being yotze the mitzvah of achilas matzah, you do it on the night of the 15th of Nisan. But I'm not in the mood. I'd like to do it the night of the 17th of Nisan. The Torah says when to do it. You're free to enjoy matzah on the 17th of Nisan, but to do the mitzvah of the Erev Toiful Matzahs, it must be the 15th night of Nisan. So the Torah tells us what we can do, when we can do, and how we can do it. Sometimes those things are inconvenient, and sometimes those things don't match with what we think is right or wrong, but that's because we're human. And we bend to God's right and wrong because he's the ultimate objective truth on what's right and what's wrong. So those kind of shilas are very difficult to paskin, but the mere fact that you ask the shilah is already proof that Eretz Yisrael has taken on a different level in your understanding. So a person says, yeah, I can do what I want. I already made aliyah, pat me on the back, God give me olam haba, I made aliyah, and now I can come and go as I please, when I please. So if that's the attitude about Eretz Yisrael, that's problematic. But when a person comes to Eretz Yisrael, lives in Eretz Yisrael, and he says, whenever I leave, I want to ask a shayla to make sure that this is a permissible reason to leave. And I'm going to take upon myself the possibility that the Rav or the Posek may say, no, you can't leave. A lot of people don't want to ask shilas for that reason because they don't want to hear the answer. No, that's not a reason. What do you mean your second cousin's first nephew is getting bar mitzvah? So the bar mitzvah can happen without you there. Yeah, but we're very close. Okay. The Rav may say to you, that's not a reason to leave Eretz Yisrael. And you have to be willing to abide by the psak. And some people don't want to ask. But the idea that you ask already is showing, it's a demonstration. Eretz Yisrael is important to me. I don't just do what I want. I'm going to ask. And as I said, person's walking down the aisle at Yesh or at Best, he sees something on the shelf. He's been always looking for this kind of Dijon mustard, except the problem is it has a halachic, it has a kosher certification. He doesn't know what this kosher certification is. You don't buy it. You call someone, you call your Rav, it has a triangle X, Y, Z kosher on it. Do you know the Rav? Can I trust this? Can I eat it? Why do we ask these kasher shilas? Because kasher is important to us. We don't want to eat treif. If Eretz Yisrael is important to us, we ask a shilah, can I leave? If Eretz Yisrael is something that I can toss and turn as I please, you don't ask a shilah, I come and go as I please. After all, I already made aliyah, pat me on the back. The idea already that someone's asking a question, can I leave to visit my elderly parents, already puts Eretz Yisrael on a higher pedestal than it would otherwise be, and that's a good thing. What the answer is, I can't tell you what the answer is. There's all kinds of circumstances involved, but I can tell you that at the end of Yerushalmi Shavios, the Yerushalmi just raised the issue, is kibbut av v'em, one of the reasons to leave Eretz Yisrael. We saw the Rambam seems not to bring that down as a reason to Eretz Yisrael, and people can do with that as they may, although I tell you that there are tshuvas written about going to Chutz La'aretz to visit elderly parents. So we're in the Rambam Hilchos Malachim Perek Hey, Yud Aleph. Amru Chachamim have told us, Kol hashochin be'eretz Yisrael avonosav mechulin. If someone lives in Eretz Yisrael, Hashem forgives his sins. Now, this doesn't mean that you come to Eretz Yisrael, do what you want, whatever you want, God's going to forgive you because you're in Eretz Yisrael. We already have a mission in Yuma that tells us, Echatov Oshur or Echatov Yom Kippur Machaber doesn't work. A person says, I'll do an Aveir and then I'll do Tshuva. A person says, I'll do an Aveir and I'll wait for Yom Kippur to atone for it. It's not going to work. You can't go into something sinning and believing that there's already an atonement at the end of the road. So a person that lives in Eretz Yisrael, he does Naveira, never B'Shoigeg. Something came over him b'mezid. Eretz Yisrael helps in the process of atoning for the sins just being here. It's one of the zchusim of being here. The Israeli government gives out zechuyot for making aliyah, and God gives out zechusim for making aliyah as well. And this is one of the zchusim. You live in Eretz Yisrael, the atonement for sins can be made a bit easier. Shenema, the pasuk says, by the way, the Rambam's not making any of this up. This is all coming from a Gemara in Ksubas and Daf Kuf Yud Aleph. Afilu holach ba'arba amas, even if a person walked only 4 amas in Eretz Yisrael, it's such a great mitzvah just to walk 4 amas in Eretz Yisrael that for that a person has already a share in the world to come. And people frequently say to each other when they go to new places in Eretz Yisrael, you go up north, you go south, west, east, wherever you're going, and it's a place you've never been, and you get out of your car and you walk, people say to each other, Anaya Dalit Amas. It's a new 4 amas that you've never walked on in Eretz Yisrael, and it's a new schus. Similarly, a person that didn't live in Eretz Yisrael, but he's buried in Eretz Yisrael, the schus of being buried in Eretz Yisrael is a kapara for him. It's as if the place that he was buried becomes like a mizbeach that helps atone for his sins. Shenema v'chiposei admosei amoy. Uve'puranas hu'omer al admat al adoma tamei atomus. And when God punishes, there's a pasuk that says, and you shall die on adoma tameya, on ground that's tamei. We learned about this last week. Mishnah in Nazir in Perek Gimel, the Chachamim will go is a tuma al eretz amen. The land outside the biblical borders of Eretz Yisrael is ritually impure, and every moment that a Jew is in Chutz La'aretz, he is ritually impure. He is living inside ritual impurity. That's what Chazal say. It's not an Agadita, it's a halacha. If a Jew, while he was in Chutz La'aretz, said, Hareini Nazir, and he kept a perfect Naziris for 30 days, the minimum requirement, didn't drink wine, didn't take a haircut, didn't become Tameh, when he comes to Eretz Yisrael, he has to keep his Naziris all over again for the 30 days, because the Naziris in Chutz La'aretz doesn't count, because he kept Naziris in a defiled state, because Chutz La'aretz is defiled. That's a halachic statement. So the pasuk says, "B'Puranos Lo'aleinu," when Jews are being punished, the pasuk says, "Al adoma temeya tomus." You won't even have the schus to die in Eretz Yisrael. You're going to die on adoma temeya. Even though the Rambam says, I just quoted the Gemara that says that even if a person never came to Eretz Yisrael, which is a shayla in itself, a person that didn't live in Eretz Yisrael, and there's a shayla if a person never came to Eretz Yisrael a single time in his whole lifetime, whether he's permitted to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. A person that's visited Eretz Yisrael but decided not to live here, la'achamisa, he can be brought here to be buried. That's a whole different shayla. So a person that lived in Eretz Yisrael is better than a person who never didn't live in Eretz Yisrael and never had to be brought here to be buried. There's no comparison between a Yid who Eretz Yisrael hugged while he was alive to a Yid that Eretz Yisrael hugged his dead body. And there's a famous Maisa in the Yerushalmi about Ula. Ula was a great lover of Eretz Yisrael, and at times he would travel to Bavel for Torah reasons. He had shilas he wanted to ask. He wanted to meet with certain Gedolim in Bavel to discuss Torah. And Lo Yaleinu, Ula expired in Bavel. And they brought his body back to Eretz Yisrael to bury him. And one of the things that was said about Ula is, woe to Ula, a person who loved Eretz Yisrael so much, and his neshama was taken from him in Chutz La'aretz. And the mashal that the Yerushalmi says is that a person, when he expires, he wants to be held by his mother. That's the Yerushalmi's mashal. A person wants to expire in the hands of someone that loves him. So the Yerushalmi gives a mashal of a mother. Never, a person doesn't want to expire by himself, lonely, whether it's family, loved ones, friends. At the Yitzias Neshama, Jews have a minhag. There should be 10 people at Yitzias Neshama. So the Yerushalmi says a mashal that Nebuch Ula, he loved Eretz Yisrael. He lived in Eretz Yisrael, and Nebuch, it happened that he went to Bavel and he died in Bavel. He didn't die with his mother hugging him. Had he died in Eretz Yisrael would be hugging him while he died. And Nebuch, he died on Adama Tumeya, he died on defiled land in Bavel. So the Rambam is now quoting that there's a big difference between being hugged by Eretz Yisrael while you're alive versus being hugged by Eretz Yisrael when the person is a dead body. V'afal PK, nevertheless, Gedolei Chacham Hayimolichim Meiseyam Lasham. Gedolei Yisrael would make sure that they would bring the bodies to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. Seilomad mi Yaakov Avinu v'Yosef HaTzadik. The lessons of Yaakov Avinu and Yosef. Now Yaakov Avinu lived in Eretz Yisrael and left. His body, he made Yosef promise that he would take his body back to Eretz Yisrael. Yosef did live in Eretz Yisrael, went to Mitzrayim, and before he died, he made his brothers promise that his bones would be brought back to Eretz Yisrael. So these are examples, Yaakov and Yosef, who made others swear that they would bury them in Eretz Yisrael. So you see the big schusa is when that time comes for a person to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. Halacha Yud Beis, this comes straight from the Gemara in Ksubis. La'olam yoder odem beretz Yisrael v'afilu be'ir shiru ba'akum v'al yoder b'chutz l'oretz v'afilu be'ir shiru b'Yisrael. A person should always live in a city in Eretz Yisrael, even if the city, the majority population are Goyim, and not live in Chutz La'aretz, in a city whose population is a majority of Jews. So just putting this in context, I'm not saying everybody's going to look up all kinds of svarim and what does the Rambam mean and go back to the Gemara in Ksubis and what does the Gemara in Ksubis mean? How can you raise your children if most of the city of Goyim? Isn't it better to raise your children in a city where the majority are Jews? Yeah, you may feel that way. The Gemara feels differently. That's the halach in the Gemara, that's the halach in the Rambam. But is the halach in the Rambam also true today? I'm just reading the Rambam. Okay, you contact your local rabbi to find out if the Rambam remains true today. So to put it into a perspective, if someone said you have a choice, you can live in Caesarea or you can live in Jaffa, where there's majority of Goyim, or you can live in Williamsburg, where there's a majority of Jews. Okay, you decide now. You read the Rambam. Yeah, but the Rambam was written 900 years ago. Today it's different. Hey, do whatever you want. We just read the Rambam. Okay. Shekol hayotze lechutz la'aretz kilo ovid avodah zarah. The Rambam's quoting the Gemara in Ksubis. Anyone that leaves Eretz Yisrael to go to Chutz La'aretz, it's as if you worshipped an idol. It's a direct quote from a Gemara in Ksubis. And we read the Rashi when we're doing Parshas Bahar. Rashi quotes this Gemara, albeit a little differently. Shenemar ki gershuni hayom estapech benachas Hashem leimor lech avod Elohim acherim. Okay, those are the halachas that the Rambam brings down about Eretz Yisrael. So you see how the Rambam emphasized living in Eretz Yisrael. It's prohibited to leave Eretz Yisrael on a temporary basis. It's permitted for several reasons, but you have to come back. To leave Eretz Yisrael, to live in Chutz La'aretz, it's completely prohibited, except in the case of famine, inflation, and even then pious people shouldn't leave Eretz Yisrael. You should live in Eretz Yisrael, in a city that's majority Goyim, rather than Chutz La'aretz, in a city that's majority Jews. V'chulu. All these are Gemara some Ksubis. So why didn't the Rambam count it as one of the 613 mitzvahs? Blined, we'll take a look at that tomorrow. Blined, we're going to take a look at a piece of Chesed Lavrom. The Chesed Lavrom was a Makubal. He was an Azulai. It was a Makubal that lived at the end, approximately the year 1600. He came from Fez, Morocco to Hebron. He had to leave Hebron because of a plague in Hebron in 1619. He moved to Aza, and in Aza, he wrote his famous Kabbalah Sefer called Chesed Lavrom. We'll take a look tomorrow, Blined, at a piece of Chesed Lavrom, which is startling, about what happens when Mashiach comes. Two distinct groups of Jews. Those Jews who made Aliyah before Mashiach came, versus those Jews who remained in Chutz La'aretz and waited for Mashiach to come and bring them to Eretz Yisrael. So the Chesed Lavrom tells us the big difference that will happen to those two different types of Jews when Mashiach comes here, if Yemein or Yemein. All Yidden that need refuah, all Yidden need Yeshua, all Yidden need Nechamas, all Yidden that need Barachas, Yeshua, Nechamas, refuahs only come to the Rebbeinu Shalom how he wants, when he wants, through the shlichus that he wants, because he's the Echad Yochad Yuchad, he's the only true existence upon which we depend every millisecond of the day. And by understanding that and absorbing that into our lives, that's a Gilui HaYichud for us, and it helps the Gilui HaYichud in bringing Mashiach to the whole universe, so that the universe can become a better place for all mankind. We'll see the Binyan Beis HaMikdash that we learned about Masechta Midas, the Avodah that we're learning about Masechta Tamid, V'hashev es ha'avodah l'dvar beisecha. We should be zeicha to a gula shlem remain. Everybody have a wonderful day. Take care of yourselves. Stay healthy. What can be done can be done. What can't be done can't be done. Take into consideration age, health factors, and all the other factors of what's going on outside. Stay healthy. Keep healthy so we continue learning B'ezrat Hashem together. I believe a message was sent around. There will be no shir tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, shir will start at 10, but I will start the shir with Sefer Yeshaya. We're not going to continue in Yeshaya from where we were up to, and that's in honor of this Shabbos Kodesh. This Shabbos Kodesh is Shabbos Chazon, and it's called Shabbos Chazon because the Haftorah for this Shabbos is the first chapter of Yeshayahu, Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amos, Asher Choza al Yushalayim. So we're going to go back. We are in Yeshaya. We're going to go back to Perek Aleph in Yeshaya and have an overview, so we have an understanding of the Haftorah of this Shabbos Chazon, and what it means for us in the matzah that we're in. What exactly is Yeshaya's vision? So there's no shir tomorrow. Wednesday we begin at 10, and we will begin Blined with Yeshaya Perek Aleph to prepare for the Haftorah of Shabbos Chazon. Everybody have a wonderful day.